Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My name is Clayton Craddock here, and my guest today is Sean McDaniel, the world record holder for the number of shows subbed at one time. 13, right?
Actually, 11 at once. 13 total,
11.
I think.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. You
I don't know. I don't know if it's a record, but
should get a trophy like.
thanks
Thank you for coming on my show. And
for having me.
I just have a question. Are you from New York or are you from somewhere else?
I grew up in Texas and Oklahoma, actually.
Oh, really?
Uh, so pretty far away, but I always knew that I was going to end up in New York. So I just tried to make everything happen, growing up so that I could be ready to move here and try to meet enough people from here so that I would have some connections when I moved here, that kind of thing. But it was a long-term plan.
When did you start playing drums? Was it in Texas or Oklahoma?
Let's see. Actually, I didn't mention I lived in Atlanta for 2 years. So I actually started playing when I was in Atlanta. We had a basement and I inherited a set of drums from my uncle who passed away. And my parents unpacked them one day. It's probably my 7th or 8th birthday. And my dad was also a drummer. So he showed me some basic rock beats. And I just started playing along with Hart and Bryan Adams albums and started playing guitar and keyboard and singing and writing songs. And basically just wanted to be a rock star and kept just going from there. So that was about 7 or 8, and moved to Oklahoma and Texas and kept playing all those places, always in the public school music scene and band and musicals and orchestra and show choir and jazz band, all that stuff. Just kept working my way up, trying to just learn as much as I could.
Was your father your biggest influence as far as the reason to play drums?
I don't know. I mean, he was definitely one of them because he knew those basic rock beats to show me, and also, so his brother was who I inherited the drums from, and my mom's brother was also a drummer. So there were 3 drummers in the family. That the only one of them that was professional was my uncle, but they all played, so they could show me beats, and I just tried to. I would hear a song on the radio, and I would ask my dad how to play that. I remember he tried to show me "Ticket to Ride" one time because it was such a complicated beat for a little kid. So that was a good moment, and yeah, so having that family support was always important. I never had my parents telling me that I needed to go into something else. They just, I think from that early age, assumed I was going to be doing music because I just gravitated towards it, as soon as I got those drums.
So there was never parents saying, you know what, you need to get a real job because this music thing is cool, but
No, I was
that's
lucky.
great.
My grandmother was also a professional musician. She was a violinist and she played in the Fort Worth Symphony in Texas. So they always had a professional musician in the family. So they knew it was a viable career option and that you could make a living and that, it was a real job and it's something you could do. So I was lucky that I had that in the family. So I wasn't, breaking new ground becoming a musician.
Did you have certain drummers, like rock star drummers, that you idolized growing up? Other than Steve Gadd, everybody says Steve
Yeah.
Gadd.
I think early on it was probably, like Ricky Rocket from the band Poison.
Really?
That was,
Wow.
yeah, that was a big one.
Did you
Um,
have did you have big hair when you were young? Did you
I
grow your hair?
didn't. I mean, I kind of, spiked it up with gel, but I never had the long rock star hair. But yeah, like those bands and Tommy Lee. I was into those kind of heavy metal bands for a while till I got into jazzier stuff. I started listening to Dave Weckl. I guess my drum teacher gave me a bootleg of Master Plan, and so I got into that, and then so that led me to like drum music, like fusiony stuff, which led me to actual jazz and getting to learn what the drummers I liked grew up listening to. So I had all the phases of, fusion and jazz and all that stuff. And I was taking privately and playing in the jazz band in high school, but I didn't really get heavily into jazz until college because I went to North Texas, which had a big jazz program, and Ed Soph really helped me with a lot of that stuff. But I was into and probably in the Pearl Jam, Weckl type phase, early '90s, when the singer in my band, I was in a funk band, and she let me borrow the Les Miserables CD. And so when I heard that, I'm like, whoa, what is this kind of music? It has lots of drums in it, but it also has cool songs and it has a story. And so I kind of fell in love with that album. And I started really to try to figure out a way. I was thinking, how could I combine my love of drums with my love of theater and make this happen? That I could be a Broadway drummer. And so I was like, I guess that was probably my freshman year in high school. So from then on, it was like, how do I get to New York and be a Broadway drummer? I thought it was totally an unreachable goal. I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was like, no, it'll probably never happen. But that's what that was like my dream job. So I just tried to take steps that would lead to that, but I kept studying, music and drums and tried to play in all the shows I could. I was playing in the high school shows. I remember they let me play Grease my freshman year when they usually only had professionals play. So it was special that I got to play in the band with all the adults that came in. And it was a great experience. And so then from after that, I played all the shows in the high school and tried to just play as many as I could.
So you said you had love for theater. What was the thing that made you think that, or brought you to the love for theater?
I think it was probably hearing that Les Mis album, just because the story is so epic, and like it's that novel. I read the book too to try to get the more backstory in the musical, and growing up, my parents had always taken me to see shows too, but so I got to see that one, and then they would take me to everything that came into town, and I just really enjoyed it all. And so every time we'd go see a show on tour, I'd go down to the pit and try to like wave at the drummer in the pit, and you just see if they would talk to me. And one of the ones who did was Gary Seligson, because he played the Les Mis tour for a long time, and
Yes,
he was like my idol.
I just talked to him yesterday.
And
It's funny.
oh, cool! Oh, he's such a good guy.
Yes, he
And so
is.
I was like in middle school, just hanging out over the pit, waving at him, looking at his drums, and he was just one of the he was so friendly and talked to me and took me backstage, and we just always kept in touch. And he was actually the person who gave me my first break on Broadway. You know, probably 10 to 15 years after that. So you know, those relationships you have at a young age really can pay off later in life, which is really special.
So after high school, you went to North Texas State. Now, why
Mhm.
Texas State and not Berkeley or NYU or some other place?
Well, so I definitely wanted, to do like a drum school. So I had that modern drummer article of all the drum schools. I think it had Miami, Berkeley, North Texas, and Indiana, maybe. So I looked at North Texas, I looked at Indiana, I looked at like Juilliard and Manhattan School of Music. I did classical auditions at those places. I was way out of my league. Had those like plastic marimba mallets. And I was playing my first marimba piece there. But also at the end of the day, I was kind of nervous about going far away from home. So North Texas was 45 minutes from my parents' house. So it was like basically in our backyard, but had one of the biggest drum programs in the country. So that really appealed to me about how many drummers there were, how many playing opportunities there were, and studying with Ed Soph, who I really wanted to study with because I like and the drum camps, since middle school, and I got to know him through that. So it was like a logical next step, and I didn't have to move that far away from home yet. So it was a great place for me because I had so much playing experience. I played in every ensemble and plus did all the musicals, and I did a lot of gigs around the Dallas-Fort Worth area while I was in school. So I was trying to just, be as well-rounded as I could because I didn't know what was going to happen when I got to New York. And I wanted to do it all in 4 years. So I had to do a few summer schools. I had to do all the academic classes in the morning because I had ensembles in the afternoon. But it paid off because I finished in 4 years and I moved to New York the day of my last class. So I didn't even go to graduation. I was just on to New York.
Wow, it's amazing.
But
So does it usually take more than 4 years to graduate from there, or is it?
I feel like a lot of the drummers stay 5, and some stay even longer and hang out. Some don't even graduate; they just stay there and take some classes. But I just knew I wanted to get to New York as fast as possible, so I did the summer school so that I could finish the academic classes that I didn't have time for during the day. And also, I had applied for grad school at NYU for composition because I figured I would study drums for my undergrad, but I was going to move to New York anyway. So if I could get into this grad school for writing music, that would be a good, a way to kind of ease into the New York scene, but still be in school. And I ended up doing that, which I think was a big help because I didn't have to be in the real world quite yet when I moved here. I still had 2 more years of school. So I was able to start playing some smaller gigs while I was in grad school and just, go see the people that I'd met on the road, go see their gigs and hang out with people, and started serving on some off Broadway shows while I was in grad school. And a lot of that led to the stuff that I ended up doing, on Broadway.
So the first person you contacted, was it Gary Seligson?
It's probably Gary. Also, Larry Lelly, I had met in Dallas, and I'd kept in touch with him. Ray Marchica was another big influence. I remember Ray was playing on the Rosie O'Donnell show one time when I came to visit New York, and he had me come watch a taping of the show, which was so exciting. And he took me to Mandy's Music, and I got to help him pick out his cymbals because he needed a new crash, I think. So we went to Mandy's and played a bunch of cymbals. I watched him do the taping, and so people like that, they were just always so supportive of me. I was just a kid coming from Texas, and everyone was always just so nice. I think the Broadway drummer community has always been such a nice community. Everyone was so nice and welcoming. and it doesn't seem as competitive as maybe some other instruments. So it's fun to get to hang out with everybody, and everybody just welcomed me. So you're just trying to work my way in, but I never wanted to be annoying or pushy or anything. So I just kind of took my time and did as much as I could, you know.
Yeah, one thing about that, it's an interesting thing you brought up because having a show, there are a lot of people that want to do what we do and they reach out to you in different ways. There are people that are a little off-putting, but there are people that are really genuinely interested in doing what we do. And how would you suggest someone that's interested in approaching someone just like you did years ago? What kind of ways do you think that they should reach out to people that have shows that if they want to go hang out and watch people play, what do you suggest that they do?
I mean, I think any kind of message is great. Facebook messages I get sometimes, or emails, or texts. You know, when people introduce themselves, I'm always happy to meet a new person. And usually, if I have a show, I'll have them come sit with me. You know, I think for most of Frozen and Book of Mormon, I had a guest with me once a week. I think people
Wow.
used to make fun of me, but I just, you know, if unless someone seemed like they weren't, you know, gonna be like a normal human being in the pit, they would usually get to come hang out with us. And I've met a lot of great people that way. A lot of people have become my subs. A lot of people I've recommended for gigs based on hanging out in the pit. So it's definitely a great way to meet people. And you know, you can tell a lot about someone when they come to watch. I'm sure you've experienced this too. The people that come in are like, oh, I could do this, or this doesn't look too hard, those kind of things. Or the people that are like, wow, you sound great. This is so exciting to be here. You know, there's a big difference. There's a range of the reactions people have. I've had someone leave at intermission one time. So they said they
Really?
had enough. Yeah.
Wow. Why? They
And
just
they just
didn't.
said, they're like, "Oh, I've had enough." That's what they did. I thought they thought the show was over maybe. And I was like, "Oh, there's some more." And I said, "Oh, it's okay."
I'm out. See you.
Yeah.
Wow. Really? That's something.
But most people are really nice and happy to be there. And it's been fun to have, you know, to try to give back because of all the people that helped me out when I moved here. So I try to do the same thing.
What was, excuse me, what was the first show that you actually watched on Broadway?
So I guess on Broadway, I think it was Les Mis, which was my favorite show. And it was that same trip where I came and hung out with Ray. Um, Bill Lanham was playing Les Mis, and I met him through the stage manager of Les Mis who did the tour. And I was an intern at the theater in Dallas during college. So every summer during college, I would be an intern on all the shows that came through. So that's how I met like Larry Lelly and a lot of Broadway drummers that came through. And the stage manager of the tour was, I think, the stage manager of Broadway later. So I just said, "Hey, I'm in town. You think you could introduce me to Bill?" Or maybe he offered, and he introduced me to Bill, and I got to sit with him. So it was really special to get to see that music I'd grown up with, to see it in person and sit in that pit and watch it in action. So that was the first actual Broadway pit I was in. But then the first one that I was there to learn a show as a sub was Aida, which was for Gary Seligson, the Elton John Disney show. So, but actually, I think I probably watched Gary before I knew I was going to sub. I think I just watched him to hang out. And it was probably a year after that where he's like, "Want to come back and watch? Because now you're going to learn it." So that was that. You know, it's a different thing when you're watching for fun, and then when you're watching to try to learn it.
So how did you prepare to sub at AIDA?
So that was crazy. I had just finished grad school, so I had nothing going on, and Gary needed a new sub, and you know he'd known me since I was a kid, but he had seen that I had started subbing on some off Broadway shows, and I was playing at the Westchester Broadway Theater in Elmsford, where he subbed at one point, and I was doing bands and jazz gigs and all kinds of freelance things. So he saw that I was doing stuff, so he said maybe he could give me a chance as a sub because I think he needed someone that had the time to sit there and just learn it. So I had a studio space and I set up my drums exactly like the pit drums. And I just took a month and just shed the show every day. I memorized the whole thing. I did every fill that Gary did, every ghost note, and just immersed myself in it. And so that when I went into play, even if I was extra nervous, which I was prepared beyond a level of nervousness so that even with the nerves, I could still get through the show. And I did okay, I guess. And so I got to come back and play it some more. And just playing that show for Gary um, led to every other subbing gig. So, the word got around because Gary, everyone knows Gary. And I guess they would say, who did you recommend? And he would recommend me. And then people would call me. And then other musicians I played with in the pit, like non drummers, would recommend me to shows they were playing. So it just kind of built up and snowballed to where I was just subbing a lot. And and had all that music in my head. I was young enough to have the capacity for that, just to play. You could play Lion King for the matinee and Rent at night and Fiddler on the Roof. It was just a very varied scores in my brain.
So start out at Aida. Word got around. What was the second show that you subbed on? Do
I
you
think
remember?
second. I think second was Les Mis actually,
Wow,
which was that was like a childhood dream. Like I never thought that would happen to actually play on the Les Mis on Broadway. So I owe Bill Lanham for that. And I remember the first text message I ever received was on my little Nokia. It was from Bill Lanham, and I was sitting in the pit at Aida, and I always remember that. And I got to come watch and learn that one. And Les Mis was hard because since it opened in the 80s, they didn't have the fancy monitoring system that they had at Aida. So you had a hotspot, like one of those little stand monitors, and you could turn it on or off basically. And it had just keyboard, bass, and maybe guitar. Like that was it. You couldn't hear the vocals. It was scary, but I was so glad I got to do it. It was so rewarding that I got to fulfill that dream. So I always will appreciate Bill for that.
you said you worked on some off-Broadway shows before you
Mhm.
got some Broadway gigs. What were the off-Broadway shows?
So I got one for that same stage manager, Tom Schilling, who I'd met in Dallas, hooked me up with an MD, Bruce Coyle, who was doing the show called The Gory Details, which was based on Edward Gorey's cartoons. It was a really quirky show, but I was still in grad school. So I thought I'd hit the big time because I had my name in a playbill and it was an off-Broadway show. I probably paid, I don't remember what it paid, but I was getting a paycheck and I was like, this is it. This is the real New York life. So I was trying to balance that with grad school, but luckily it didn't run very long. It was a short-lived run, but it was the Union Square Theater it was the 16th, the Century Center down there, right by Union Square. And so that was the first one. But then I ended up subbing on a show called Bat Boy, which
Oh
was,
yeah, Matt Beck
yeah,
was in that band, right?
yeah.
Yes.
And Matt Urbano
Who was the
and
drummer on
Greg
that?
Saff was playing. I think it was Ed Fast.
Okay.
He was a friend of Gary Selig's. And once again, Tom Schilling, same stage manager, it keeps coming back to him. And Gary hooked me up with that gig, which is where I met Alex Lockamore. He was the MD. And so many of my gigs over the years have been with Alex, and that relationship all started from subbing on that off-Broadway show. So if I had, gone in and done terribly there, that could have been the end of my relationship. But luckily I prepared and I did well there, and it was a fun show.
One thing that I think happens a lot, if you establish a relationship with a musical director and they like what you do, you generally get hired by that person over and over again, which is a good.
Mhm.
And
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of happened to me with Kenny Seymour and other people that I've worked with over the years. They like what I've done, and so it's definitely good to establish that relationship, and hopefully that will lead to bigger things, which
Mhm.
it did with you. Which your first Broadway show was what? Where you
So the
were the
first
drum
one,
chick.
that was Spamalot. It was the Monty Python musical. And that came through Michael Keller, who, if you don't know, he's one of the contractors on Broadway. So he's one of the people that hires the bands for these shows. But as you know, and a lot of drummers know, most of the time the drummers are already hired by either the composer or the music director, and they're already on board. But for some reason, Spamalot didn't have that situation. So Michael Keller was asked, he was the contractor, so he was asked to recommend a drummer. So I was subbing on so many of his shows that he had been hearing my name from people, and that I was doing, you know, all different styles of shows. And Spamalot had a mix of styles, so they needed someone versatile. So Michael recommended me to the music director, who was Todd Ellison. And so I had to go do an interview with Todd and the choreographer, Casey Nicola, who's now a huge director, but he was choreographing that show and Todd was the MD. So I met them, I think, at rehearsal studio, maybe Shetler or something. That was just the two of them. It was very informal, just hanging out. They were like asking me what kind of shows I liked. I didn't play anything. And then I go home, and then the next day I'm in rehearsal for a Broadway show, making up drum parts. Like, I didn't even know that's what you did. Like, they're just like, here's the piano part. We're working on this scene. Just play some stuff. And so I owe that one to, to Keller getting me in there with that interview, and then Todd hiring me. And we ended up running for 4 years. And it was
Wow.
it was an amazing gig. It was so fun.
So before that, though, which I go back to my introductory statement, you held the world record for the number of shows subbed because it matters. Let me tell you why. You had 11 shows at one time. That's amazing. I think I might have had 2 or 3, and that's a lot. But 11, man, how did you? I mean, obviously you were younger and you had the
Yeah.
energy and you had the capacity to do so. What was it like, having all those shows at one time?
I mean, it was definitely exciting because, I lived in the city, so I could be someone's last minute call. If one time Tommy Igo got stuck in traffic. So he's like, can you run over and play Lion King? I remember I was eating dinner with my parents. They were in town and they're like, go, go. They were so happy that I got called for a gig. So I would run over. And so sometimes it would be a last minute thing. Sometimes it would be planned. A lot of times there would be juggling where I'd have booked a show, but then someone was in a bind. Like, can you switch this show to get some play for me and get another sub, which happens to all of us now. And we're happy to accommodate because it does happen. But I just remember it was always fun to just go in and try to nail whatever show I was on and try to put myself in the mind of that drummer playing on their set. Usually I'm shorter than most of the drummers I sub for, so I'm always having to reach for stuff and just always trying to have a perfect show everywhere and have no mistakes. And I didn't want to get notes. A lot of conductors will give you notes at the end and say what you did wrong, whatever. My goal was always to try to have no notes and have nobody notice I was there or have someone say, wow, I didn't even know the drummer was out tonight. So I was always challenging myself for that. And it was just rewarding to play all the different music and to play with all the different musicians. Cause not only are you playing with all the regular bands, there's always substance. So you're playing with sometimes a different bass player every time you go in or a different conductor. So you get to meet everybody and you see who's a little bit different and who you enjoy playing with. And you just have these relationships and then you make friends places. So, when you go in, you also get to say hi to everybody, and once you've played enough, you stop being nervous and you can actually talk to people. So that was fun when I got to that point. Yeah, it was a great period. I know I couldn't do it now, but it was a definitely exciting time.
What were the 11 shows that you were on?
So let's see. Well, Aida, Les Mis, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Fiddler on the Roof, Lion King, Wicked. What else? Oh God, there's a lot.
That's only 6.
Nine, nine Avenue Q. Well, I have a list if you want to.
Wow. Yes, I mean, hear the list.
Okay, Aida, Les Mis, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Rent, Fiddler on the Roof, Nine, Lion King, Wonderful Town, Wicked, Assassins, The Producers, Avenue Q.
My God.
Yeah. So
That's
busy time.
The thing about that, it just shows you how versatile you are. You're like the Vinnie Colaiuta of Broadway drumming. Holy
that's a good
cow,
comparison.
man.
It's hard because some of those shows, you're slamming and like breaking sticks, and then some you have to play so soft that you're using tiny sticks and you just don't want anyone to shush you. So it's a range because even now, some shows you're in a booth, sometimes you're not in a booth. So that the volume is always the hardest thing. I always say volume and tempo is the hardest thing because that's what people notice if it's too fast or if it's too loud. So just getting those things right in all the places. Luckily, when you have a click track and a drum booth, it solves 2 of those issues.
Did you ever watch that movie Whiplash?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever have those experiences? You're rushing. You're slowing
right.
down.
There are definitely some conductors like that. Sometimes they'll get this. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but I guess in the old days and even into when I started playing, there were conductors that would get angry on the podium, throw things, curse at people. Some people, I feel like once you get something really grooving, they still have the urge to move it, which is why I like playing a show with a click because you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But I never had anyone yell at me too bad, which was good, I guess.
Yeah, I was talking to Shannon Ford about notes and how I never like to receive a lot of notes. And after subbing a couple of times, you get less and less of them, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a note, you'd be like, okay. And some people, what do you mean by I didn't do it this way? You don't want that kind of attitude because you won't be asked back.
Yep.
But the notes are constructive criticism because they know what they want. So you need to just do what they ask you to do. I just remember one time subbing for Rich Mercurio at Little Shop of Horrors, and Henry Aronson was the musical director. And he would mess with me sometimes by picking up his yellow pad because I'd wonder, I was like, oh my God, is he talking about, is he writing this down? He's like, Clayton. Like, oh, okay, now you're messing with me.
Oh my
gosh. After a while, it was fun. It got more relaxed. Like you said, after a while, you can start talking to the people in the band. And
yep.
So out of all of those shows that you were doing, what was the most difficult one that you subbed on?
I always say that I think that Lion King was probably the hardest. There was no click on Lion King at that point. They've added one since, but so there was a lot of tempo stuff, and there were 5 percussionists. So you had to navigate being in the center of that orchestra with 2 percussionists in the pit and then 2 in the house, all basically playing 16th notes the entire show. So it's, you know, it was really tricky, but it was so rewarding when everything came together and so fun, you know, playing Circle of Life and you see those animals walking down the aisle and everything. So I'll always appreciate Tommy Igoe for that opportunity, which came from playing and came from knowing the bass player Dave Phillips, who was also subbing at Lion King, and he was one of those Les Mis tour musicians. So I had known him from an early age, and he recommended me to Tommy. Um, and so it was hard because Tommy is such a good drummer, and he plays so many cool things, and so I had to realistically say, what can I pull off that Tommy's doing, and how can I simplify some of the things so that I don't sound like, you know, I'm trying to copy him doing things that I'm not capable of doing, you know. So I simplified a few things, but I really wanted to make it sound like what he does. So that was tough, and the tempo stuff was hard, but you know, it was rewarding, and I love playing there. But that was probably the most challenging, I guess. Of course, Aida was hard too, since it was my first one, and Aida had a lot of electronics mixed in with the drums. So you had like electronic pedals and pads all over the drums, plus an octapad. So a lot of different patch changes and knowing where to hit what, you know, because you wouldn't want to hit a funny sound effect that would go off in the wrong place.
What was what was your next show after Spamalot?
So during Spamalot, I was lucky enough that I made enough connections subbing and playing it that I had connections with a lot of musicians in town. So during Spamalot, I think I basically was working on the musicals that I did for the next 10 years because we were already working on things like 9 to 5 and Book of Mormon. So directly after Spamalot, I went to 9 to 5, which is Dolly Parton musical that we had been workshopping during my time at Spamalot and getting it ready for Broadway. We had to go to LA for a little and then we came in. So that was my next one. And it was really exciting to get to do Dolly's new music that she had written and to originate another show because, I didn't know if Spamalot was going to be my only one ever. So it was cool that I got to do a second one.
Did you get a
Didn't
chance
it,
to meet her?
yeah, she was around a lot. She came to the workshops a lot and she was very friendly. She talked to all of us and she would bake brownies for us on her tour bus actually fudge. She would bake fudge on the tour bus and bring it in. And
Really?
she was super nice. I remember one time during previews, my parents were there and they had left the theater and I saw her backstage. I said, my parents would love to get a picture with you and meet you. And she's like, oh, okay. And she waited there and I went and tracked my parents down on the street and brought them backstage and they got to meet her. She was just the coolest and wrote some really beautiful stuff. So that was definitely a rewarding experience.
That's great. Will you start, doing these shows? I learned over the years that you start meeting people either in the pit or outside that you idolized growing up. I remember starting, especially at Memphis, I started playing with people that I remember hearing on records. It's like, wait a minute, you played on this record that I used to play
Mhm.
when I was a little kid, and I'm playing next to you. And I was like, it's just a fascinating experience.
Mhm.
Were you ever starstruck by the people that you started working for, like Dolly Parton or anyone else?
Yeah, Dolly was a big one for sure. And I remember at Aida, John Harrington, the guitar player, was there and he played for Steely Dan. So
Yes.
that was a pretty big one because I was like playing with him in that pit and then he was gonna go play with Steely Dan after. It's like it was crazy. And there's all kinds of people like that, like Tom Barney at Lion King, just people you play with that's the cool thing about Broadway is that the level is so high that a lot of these musicians on Broadway are playing with huge people on their off time from Broadway. So it's so fun to hear those stories and to play with them and realize they're playing with some of my favorite drummers, in other gigs. So that's always been a really, really cool thing.
A lot of people nowadays, they go to music school and then they come out and they want to play Broadway. I know that was one of your main goals is to do what you're doing now. Did you ever think that you wanted to go and be a rock star or play with, somebody like Steely Dan? Or was Broadway your main focus
I
always?
mean, I wanted to just be a professional musician. I wanted to make a living playing drums however I could. But, you know, the rock star dream was before Broadway. I definitely had that and I really wanted that. But it seemed even harder to attain than Broadway, which seemed impossible. But I I always I always kept both in the back of my mind and through my, playing on Broadway and freelancing in New York, I was able to get hooked up with Clay Aiken from American Idol. So I got to do a few tours with him, so I finally got to have like like a pop tour. So that was another dream come true, getting to do that and playing those big places and not being in the pit, being on stage. So I was recognized by the fans and that kind of stuff. And that was a whole experience. So I'm so glad I got to have that because it's so different than Broadway. And it did like, maybe fulfill my dream of almost being a rock star, playing those big places, the big power ballads and everything. Um, but I just wanted to, you know, I just still now I just want to play any kind of music I can and do as many gigs as I can. And just, I love having Broadway as a home base when that's around. But I just love playing anything and I just want to keep doing it.
If you could have a hair band like Rat 2021 style, would you do it?
Right. Oh yeah. I would love to do like put together a cover band, do a gig somewhere.
Motley Crue.
Mhm. Dr. Feelgood, top to bottom.
So after you did Spamalot, then 9 to 5, what was the next show that you had after that?
Let's see. It was 09.
Lacage?
Oh, the college was next, but we were working on Book of Mormon. So I knew it was coming, but my friend Todd, who I did Spamalot with, was doing the college. And he said, do you want to come do this? Because, 9 to 5 closed a little prematurely. I thought it was going to last until Mormon. So it was actually perfect because I had that time before Mormon. So I got to say yes and hang out with my friend Todd and we got to do a show together. And it was the first time I'd done a show that was a revival, which means it's a show that had been done in the old days and they're bringing it back. And it was also the first time I'd done a show that had been originated by someone else because it started in London. So I remember the first thing I wanted to get recordings of the London version because I wanted to make sure I was playing it. I wanted the music supervisor from London to like me. So I wanted to play it like as what he was used to hearing. So I got the pit recordings. I was in touch with the drummer out there to just make sure I could, because so little of what drummers play on Broadway is written in the score. A lot of it is by ear and stuff people have added. So you get the charts. And I wanted to write everything in that the drummer was doing out there. So I got to do that. And I also wanted to put my own little spin on it because this is the Broadway version. So we're doing, the New York version. So I did get to change some stuff and add some things. And I was always trying to think like, where is this show set? And I was like set on an island. This was like 1980 or something. So I was thinking, what would that drummer, because we're playing in a nightclub, I was thinking, what would that drummer have been listening to in real life? And I was thinking, he probably listened to Steve Gadd back then. And so I was trying to play it as play the music, authentically, but play it with them in mind of how a drummer would have approached it if he was in that club on that island. So it was a fun experiment. I loved playing the show. We worked with Kelsey Grammer and Douglas Hodge and won some Tonys. And it took me right up into Book of Mormons. I actually had to leave that show early because Mormon was coming in.
You were working on Book of Mormon prior to Lacage?
Yeah, we spent, I think, 3 years working on Book of Mormon, starting with just a tiny workshop where they didn't even know if the show was going to be an animated movie or a Broadway musical. And it was like a 20-minute workshop. They had hand drawn this beautiful cartoon of like what they thought the set would look like. And they put it over on an overhead projector behind the reading stage. And yeah, we were just cracking up laughing the whole time, but we didn't know what was going to happen. And then we did another one. It kept getting longer and they realized it was probably going to be on Broadway. So I was really hoping for that to work out after Lacage. And it was a great transition. I just got to go from one to the next, which is a really cool feeling.
I saw you play the show in the pit once, and I saw it from the audience. Now, there's very little that makes me say, "Oh my God, that's way out of bounds." Now, but they were like, "Oh my God, it's so irreverent. You got to just crack up." Now, for the first act, and then probably halfway through the second act, I'm not going to reveal what happens because you got to see it. I was like, oh, I can't believe they did it.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy, man. But I love that stuff. I mean, apparently everybody else did too.
Yeah, some stuff we thought this is never gonna work. This is never gonna work. They won't get away with this, and it all happened, and we did it all.
I was like, wow. But I loved it. I love watching you play that show.
Thanks.
It's always great to watch what other drummers do on Broadway because we all have our little things. Like some people have, like you talked about, electronics in certain areas, and some people have a blended percussion and drum book. So each pit is very unique and it's fun to watch. So Book of Mormon won all the Tony Awards. Was it
2011?
2011. Yeah, it was right after Memphis. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And that still running. And now you left that to go where?
So during Mormon, just like with Spamalot, I was developing a lot of shows during the day. So a lot of them I would do development for, and then I wouldn't play on Broadway. Like I would just help them develop it. I would help come up with grooves and do like a reading or a workshop of the show. And then someone else would take it over to Broadway because I liked having Mormon as a home base. So I did a
Oh,
bunch of things like,
before you go on, tell me how you got involved in readings and workshops, and how does
uh,
one how does a drummer get involved in things like
again, it all goes back to the relationships you have and, you know, meeting Stephen Arimas at Wicked and Alex at Bat Boy. Those guys, when they do a reading, sometimes will call me to help develop it. And a lot of the MDs I worked with subbing would call me for readings because they liked the way I played, or they would ask the regular drummer and they weren't available. So then I would be available. That's one good thing about living in town was that I was always right there. I could get anywhere in 20 minutes. And so the thing about playing readings is you need several skills. You need to be able to, a lot of times, read piano music and know how to interpret it to play a drum part. You also have to be able to play by ear, make stuff up on the fly, knowing styles. That's why I always say playing in bands and listening is so important because they want authentic versions of these styles that they're trying to copy. So if you can play a lot of styles and can play by ear without charts, and then a lot of times you have piano music, so you're reading that and remembering what to play, or you can write it in. And then you need to be able to play very soft a lot of times in these workshops because they don't have microphones yet. I always say Broadway is like two different gigs because you play the workshop with toothpicks as soft as you can, and you get into the pit and you play like stadium rock. So it's sometimes the parts evolve because of that. So I attribute it to my time in show choir in high school where we were playing, Broadway songs and pop covers with just drums and piano and no mics. And I learned how to play soft and keep the intensity to make it sound, trying to sound like the recordings. I think that helped me a lot when I was started doing readings in New York because I knew how to play soft. And so people, I think, responded to that and started calling me to develop shows, which is how most of my shows have come from, is because I developed them early on. So during that Mormon run, I did a lot of shows that I didn't even play. Like I worked on Kiki Boots one time. I worked on Carrie the musical, like a bunch of things that I would do just and develop and not play. One of them was Newsies, the Disney musical. I helped develop that and write all the drum charts, but it was too soon to leave Mormon. So I trained Paul Davis, who ended up playing it, and I worked on a show called Violet during Mormon, where I took a leave of absence and went to play that on Broadway because it's complicated, but because of the way the contracts work, I was allowed to do that one because it was a nonprofit Broadway show. So I did that I got to do Hamilton during Mormon. I developed that for years and played it off Broadway. Um, but I didn't leave Mormon until Frozen came along because it was another one I'd been involved with way back since the movie. So I thought after 7 years, okay, maybe now it's time to leave Mormon. And seemed like a logical move. And so we had a great 2-year run until the pandemic, obviously.
that? Now, as you know, leaving a Broadway show can be risky
Hmm.
because there's only about 20 of us doing doing shows, and if you leave a long running show like Book of Mormon or The Lion King, or I'm trying to remember, a Wicked, like Gary
Hmm.
Seligson did, and you
Yep.
leave to do something else, it's a risk. So you don't know what could be another long running show, or you could run for a week. Did you
Hmm.
feel apprehensive leaving, or you were like,
Um,
I want to do something different?
I I had always wanted to do a big Disney show, and Frozen was my chance. And like I thought about it, I could have been safe and stayed at Mormon, but I really put in my time there, and I was ready for a new challenge. And since I had worked on the movie, like 5 years, 4 years before, I felt like it was like a journey that I wanted to complete, and I really wanted to be the one to be playing those songs on Broadway, and I knew it was going to be a huge orchestra. I knew it was going to be a nice pit setup. I knew we could do a cast album. Plus, we did a bunch of TV things and a music video. It was definitely the right move. I know we would have been still running if the pandemic hadn't happened and Disney had to pull the plug. Trying to cut costs in all departments, theme parks, everywhere, and that was their Broadway, cost cutting measure. So it was sad, but I would not trade it because that was one of the best experiences ever.
Oh, wow, that's great. One thing I haven't really talked to people about are cast recordings. What was your first cast recording that you did?
So let's see. My first off Broadway show we didn't record, but my second one, it was called I Sing. We did record, and this guy Billy Eichner was in that show. Who's a famous personality now. He's a really funny internet guy and TV person. He was in the cast. We recorded that. I think it was at Edison Studios. Was it Edison or Clinton? Clinton. Wait, what's the one? Oh, I can't remember now, but whatever it
On
was
Ninth
the one.
Avenue?
Yeah, it was the big one. It was where they recorded Michelle Camillo's trio album with Dave Weckl. So I remember I was so excited to be in there, and I was thinking, wow, this is the same reverb that Dave had, and we were recording an off-Broadway show. So that was the first one, but it was a very limited budget and very quick. You know, a lot of times even Broadway shows will record in one day, but you know, if you're lucky, they'll spring for an extra day. So it's usually pretty quick. But it wasn't the same experience as doing like Frozen, where you know, you double the orchestra size for the recording and you have lots of days and lots of hours. Um, so they have a range, you know, depending on producing it or long, but you know, it's always fun to get to go and record.
Did you ever, playing these cast recordings, you go in there, sometimes you do it before you do the show on Broadway. Sometimes you do it like weeks after you open. Fortunately for me, I've had the luxury of playing the show for a long period of time before we go in. So I'm used to playing the show when I can go in and make the edits that
Mhm.
they want. And it's like playing the show. Did you have a situation at all where you weren't necessarily as prepared as you wanted to be? Was it any nerve-wracking experiences?
I mean, yeah, it's great when you can do it after you've been playing the show because all your parts are solidified. You know what you're going to play where. You and the bass player know what you're going to do. I guess for Spamalot, they wanted to have it. They wanted to be able to sell the CD on opening night, so they wanted it already recorded before we opened. So we had done the show in Chicago as pre-Broadway, and then we came to New York and did the album before we started performances. So we had a whole new band of people who were sight reading in the studio, basically. And I remember we had to set up. So I knew the show and the piano players in the show and the conductor in the show, but we were basically training this whole orchestra to do the whole show to record it. And it was at the right track, which is closed now. It was on was it 37th or 39th, a big, huge right track. It was like a gymnasium. And so they were setting up for the recording. So they had me in this booth, which was amazing. It sounded great. And they had the orchestra in the big room and everyone was ice. And they're like, but we need to rehearse first. Can you move the drums out into the main room? And they're like, no, sorry, we already mic'd them. So we had to rehearse with no headphones, with the orchestra out in the main room in this booth. It was crazy. I can't remember why. I guess it was a time issue. We just had to rehearse. And so that was scary trying to, play with people that I could barely hear. But once we started recording, we had headphones and everything, and it came out great. It's one of my favorite albums. Frank Silipetti was engineering, but that was a little scary. But after that, I think all the other ones I've done, we've done it after opening. So it's all solidified and everyone's comfortable with each other.
What was your
But
favorite cast recording that you've played on?
oh, that's tough. I love the way Frozen came out. It just sounds epic. Um, and has a huge orchestra. But Spamalot, even though it was my first one, it has I like the sound of the drums on it. A lot of times you don't spend that much time mixing the drums. I feel like on that one, they got a great drum sound. Sometimes it's hard to go back and listen to a cast album because you're used to your mix in the pit where the drums are cranked and everything's EQ'd just how you like it. And so you have to remember when you're hearing the album, it's not going to sound exactly like you're used to it. And it's hard for your ears to adjust. So it's sometimes better to wait a few years before you go back and listen.
Have you ever, a lot of musicians that play on shows don't see the shows that they're in because when they go into the audience, they're like, oh my God, it's all I hear are vocals. I don't hear what I'm doing. They're like playing all this stuff. No, fortunately for us, drums are a bigger part of most shows. Have you seen most of the shows that you played in?
No, I
Events?
never have. And it's basically for that reason, because I feel like if I saw and heard what it sounded like, it would make me play differently. And I maybe would regret some things, or I would be mad that some things weren't loud enough. So I don't ever want to see what it's like in the house. But for the good news for drummers is that a lot of times when the show's being put together, we get to sit in the audience while we're playing, while they're teching the show. We like when they're putting everything together. So we actually do see the show and we see all the special effects in the sets, and we're just playing along. So we're hearing ourselves before we move into the pit. So that's great that we get to have that experience. And then usually we'll get to have a TV monitor of the stage so we can see it from the pit. But that's how I prefer to see my own shows. And
Yeah, I did see Ain't Too Proud, not recently, but in 2019. And, I was brought to tears at the end. I'm like, oh my God, this
oh,
is
that's
so
so
good.
cool. Oh, that's amazing.
But maybe I'm just fortunate to have shows that are more groove oriented and I can
Mhm.
hear myself. But yeah, hearing how they put the orchestra down and the vocals up, I'm like, can you just like boost it up? And then you get,
Right.
like you said, you get upset with the things that you can't hear. And plus, like you said,
Hmm.
you're in the pit and you get to dial in exactly what you want. Uh,
Yeah.
what do you think the most important thing a drummer should know about being a success on Broadway?
Let's see. I mean, I think it goes back to the thing I said about relationships and just, being nice to everyone along the way because you never know who's going to be the one to give you gigs. So those personal skills are so important and having good relationships. But that's half of it. The other half is the playing. And you always have to be able to back up, your personality with your playing because you're going to want them to ask you back for both those things, not just for one. And so, staying fresh with your playing and always, staying on top of new music that's out there, always listening. So you don't, especially if you're doing like a long run, you don't want to get stale on the music or on what else is going on outside your show. So I think those are really important things. Just, trying to be the best person you can and the best player you can, not just on the Broadway music, but on every kind of music.
When you do long running shows, how do you keep things fresh?
Well, I'm sure most people know this, but you're allowed to take off from the show whenever you can take off up to half the year. I mean, you don't want to take advantage of that rule, but if you're having a day where you're like, I don't feel like playing that tonight, you can call a sub. So that's one of the beauties of it. Plus, if you have another gig, you can call a sub. So I think the way to stay fresh is to do as many outside gigs as you can. Even if it doesn't pay well, you just take it because you'll get a night off from your show and you get to play some new music. So that's one way is taking breaks and doing other things. But also when you're there, keeping it fresh because first of all, the audience is seeing it for the first time. So you got to think about that. Okay, I can't be complacent because they've never heard this before. So I got to give them the same show I gave on opening night. And the other thing is there's always going to be different musicians in the pit. So sometimes we'll have a different bass player and it'll make me play differently. So that keeps it fresh. Or even the regular bass player will do some stuff and I'll be, oh my gosh, did you hear that? And I'll do something that keeps it fresh. So always new stuff happening. There's always different singers on stage. That keeps you on your toes. And so I feel like I don't think I've ever, even though Mormon was 7 years, I don't think I ever got to the point where it was ever boring for a single night. So I think it's a lot about your mindset as well and just being positive. But there's really not much you could be bored with because so many things are changing every single night.
What are the things that you look for? You talked about subbing out. What are the things that you look for in hiring new subs for you?
A lot of times it's I just want people to be happy when I'm not there because the last thing you want is to be on vacation and get a call from the conductor saying you got to come back from vacation because we don't like your sub. So that's happened, but not to me. So you want people that everyone is gonna enjoy playing with and hanging with because if there's someone sitting at that band table before the show and everyone's like annoyed by them, they're gonna tell you you shouldn't have that person back. So you want to find people that get along with everyone, good personalities, and great playing. So a lot of times it's recommendations from either the conductor will ask for some subs they want to see, or other rhythm section people will ask for subs. And then there's the long list of people who asked me to sub, which is it's sad that I can't accommodate all those people because I'm usually working off the list of people I'm supposed to use, people that I'm asked to by the conductor, and then people I have a relationship with that have subbed in other shows. And it's hard for me to use someone that's never played a show before because a lot of times these drum books are so complicated with starting click tracks in Ableton and watching stage like stuff you have to have experience with. So a lot of times conductors will tell me this isn't the show for someone who's never played a show before because of the pressure. So I usually, if I'm going to use a new person, I'll have them, I'll wait until they've played another show first and talk to that drummer and say, oh, they did well? Great. And I'll train them. So it's just that it's personality and playing and usually experience, which is, it's hard to get. But I guess I'm trying to think if I've given someone their Broadway debut before. I don't know. But also the conductor will let you know if you can have them back. So it's not always up to you about who you get to use and who you get to keep. And so it's a tricky thing.
I remember when I was on a certain Broadway show and I had a drum sub and I kind of knew that this person wasn't going to work out very well because they wound up changing the sound of the V drums.
Oh
They
no.
actually reprogrammed. I know I'm gonna do it my ways. That I got a call. I was playing a wedding and then I got a call from Jason LaFredo. I was like, we can't have this guy. I mean, it was a text. I looked at my
Oh,
phone. I was like, oh man. So that was one instance. The other instance was on another show where the person came in and wasn't allowed back because Stephen Remus is like, no, we can't have this person back. I was like, why? And I called the person. They were like, well, they didn't like what I brought to the table. I'm like, no, you don't
Oh,
bring anything to the
never bring
table.
it.
The table's already set. Just
Yeah.
eat.
Oh gosh.
So that show, working with Stephen Remus, Matt Beck, and Adderley, was Tick Tick Boom back in
Nice.
2001, which you are the drummer on the movie, which is great. I can't wait to hear
it's
what you.
been
So tell me about how you got involved with that.
so again, it goes back to relationships. Um, in 2018, I guess it was 3 years ago, they were putting together a reading, which, like I said before, is it's like a theater reading where it's a piano and drums and the actors sitting around reading the script for something. But this was different because it was for a movie, but they still wanted to rehearse it like a show. So it was Lin-Manuel Miranda's directorial debut feature film. So he really wanted to rehearse it like a Broadway show. So Len and Alex was the music supervisor, and Kurt Crowley, also from Hamilton, who had relationships with all these people. It was just for that first one, it was just Len and Kurt. So they wanted to add drums. And I knew the music because I'd heard you play it and I'd seen you guys perform it in 2001. I had the recording. So I remembered a lot of the songs, but I knew we were going to be approaching a lot of it, in a new way because it was a movie and a lot of changes. So I came in and I played along, and we were in a little classroom up in Washington Heights in Lynn's neighborhood. So we were playing really soft. It was so exciting to hear the new script and how they took this concert that Jonathan Larson, who wrote Rent and died really young, sadly. He used to perform this concert and he called it Tick Tick Boom. And it was all the songs he wrote and it was all about his life. And so just to see how they transformed that so it was his concert, then it became the off-Broadway show that you did, which was like a theater version. And then to take it even further and make it a movie using a lot of the same source material, but still making it about Jonathan's life. So we did several of those readings like that and just kept evolving. And then they said they were going to start filming it. And Lynn always was joking at the readings, like, I'm going to make you I'm going to put you in this movie. And I was like, really? Me? And he's like, I don't want you to be in it. He goes, because one of the scenes in the movie is like a workshop. He's like, you've played so many workshops. You'd be the perfect person to play that role. And so we started rehearsing for filming. I was like, this is going to happen. And that was, I guess, January 2020. And then, of course, everything shut down. And so I was like, well, I don't know if that'll ever happen. And so, pandemic's going along. And I got a call from a movie contractor, Sandy Park. And she said, we're going to start filming Tick Tick Boom. I'm like, what? Right now? And at the time, my husband was away on another movie. And I had my son here. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I had to move to Brooklyn for a month to quarantine and film this movie. And I was like, I don't know if I can make this happen. So it was a lot of moving parts. I had to fly my mom up here. She had to quarantine for 2 weeks before she was allowed to come into our building and take care of my son. She took my son. She's, in her 70s, going to skate parks every day after school with my son. And she was amazing. And that's the reason why I was able to do it. So I had to go to Brooklyn and quarantine there while I filmed. And it was just a crazy experience. I've never done a movie before. So, I had hair and makeup every day. I had a trailer. I had this amazing hotel room with a balcony, but I wasn't allowed to leave the room, except to go to the set and back.
Wow.
So it was a crazy, crazy experience. But playing wise, I was playing on set, but I was hearing the music that I had recorded for the demos for the songs. So I was trying to match exactly what I played on those demos. And then, 6 months later, we went back and re-recorded them again, but in a big studio, and did a few more little tweaks. And when the movie comes out, you'll hear me and you'll see me, and hopefully it'll look like I'm doing all the right stuff.
Do you know how many scenes that you're going to be in?
So I'm in two big ones. Basically, whenever there's live music in the story, I'm the drummer in those scenes. So sometimes they'll flash back and forth to them. So there'll be several spots I think where you'll see me playing or sitting there or whatever. But yeah, it was very exciting.
No speaking parts, I suppose.
No speaking. No one wants to hear me talk.
You can act. What are some of the things that a drummer, either who has their own chair, I should say, what are some things that like a drummer that's subbing on a show should never do in a Broadway pit?
Well, like you said earlier, bringing stuff to the table. You're really supposed to, as a sub, you're supposed to be copying everything they do, every ghost note, every fill. every dynamic, all that stuff. It's not so much later when you're subbing and you get really comfortable and there's the kind of show that allows maybe a different fill sometimes. And you can do that and the band will be like, oh yeah, cool. But if you start doing too much, and the actors start noticing or the MD complains, that's when you probably might not get asked back or you might get more notes. So it's best to start off just copying everything and trying to get into the feel of that drummer, the feel and sound of that drummer the best that you can.
What are some things that drummers should always do in a Broadway piece?
Well, biggest thing is stare at the conductor. Just always be looking at the conductor. That's why it's so important to have this music in your body. Like I said on Aida, it was my first one I memorized it all. I didn't even look at the charts. That's a lot to ask on every single show. So usually the music is put in a place where you have a sight line to the conductor. But if it's not, they just always want to know that you're communicating with them, because if they need to move something, if they need to tell you something, you need to be looking. They don't want to ever have to get your attention, especially as a sub, because they're already going to be nervous that the regular drummer is not there. So that communication is so important, and just being nice to everyone because you want to be asked back.
On the long running shows that you've had, you talk about memorizing the show. Do you still have the music there, and do you look at it, or do you just have it there just as a collecting dust?
I mean, I always have it there, and I always flip the pages, because if you zone out, which could happen, like start daydreaming or something, and you look up and you're like, wait, where were we? And so, especially if there's a show like Mormon or Frozen where you're running like tracks and samples and things, you want to always have that in front of you so you can glance up and be like, I'm on that patch. So I always keep it there and flip the pages, even if I'm not reading the notes. But it's just great to have the visual reminder, and also the muscle memory of turning pages is going to keep you in the form of the song, because if you're always turning pages in the same exact spot, your body just knows where you are. So I think that's important.
You know what? I got to tell you, it's probably something I should probably do, because I don't do that. And yes, you can zone out. And there's some times where it's like click, click, and you're like, oh shit, what song am I in? Then I got to go, ba, ba, da, boom. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I can't do that. I can't zone out. But yeah, you always have to be focused. That's you know what? When we go back, I think I'm going to open up my book. For the first
Just love for
time.
looks. Just have it there.
I'm sure you have plenty of endorsements. Who are some of the people that you
So
endorse?
I've been
Companies.
lucky enough to the longest one is DW, and that was another childhood dream. Ricky Rocket and Tommy Lee always had those DW kits, and I just always was into it. So that was my high school graduation gift from my parents, was a DW kit, which I still have and I've used on several Broadway shows. So I thought when Spamalot happened, oh, I can finally get endorsements. I was like, hey, send the press kit around. It didn't really happen like that because, more now, I guess Broadway is on a more national level with those kind of things. But back then it wasn't as big. So that wasn't enough. But then I remember once Spamalot, we won the Grammy Award, which in the drum company world, Grammys that's something they understand. They don't know what Tonys are. But so that's when I got the DW endorsement. And after that, I got Remo and Vic Firth, but now I use Evans. I still use Vic Firth, and I got Peisty when I got the Clay Aiken tour, but now I use Sabian. So right now it's DW, Evans, Vic Firth, and Sabian, and they've all been amazing. And having the relationship with the company, just something that I don't take for granted, because when you need something, they can get it to you. They can make you special things that you can't buy other places. Just having that direct line of contact, I think, is so helpful. And then when you're playing in another city, DW always has a set that I can use, and you just know it's going to be consistent. And so I think it's really great to have. And I really, appreciate all these companies for everything they've done.
So you work with Dina Menzel, Cheyenne Jackson, Ruben Studdard, Ariana Grande, and Jane Lynch. Who are you working with right now?
Right now, it's just finishing up the Tick Tick Boom movie. I've been doing some concerts. Some clubs are starting to open up again. So the past 2 weeks, I've had some concerts. One was like kind of singer-songwriter, and one was kind of pop covers. I might have another TV project coming up soon. I'm doing an album right now for a composer named Scott Allen, which I'm doing for my own studio. So things like that. A lot of the home recording has been a lifesaver during the pandemic, because I've been able to do stuff on my own time. People send me tracks and I can record them and send them back. So that's mostly what I've been doing lately while I'm waiting for live performing to really come back.
Is there a Broadway show that looks like it's in the pipeline for you coming up?
Not right now. It's a strange time because since 2004, I've always known what my next Broadway show is going to be, and right now I don't because I haven't been doing as much development in the past year. And normally at least once a month I'll do a workshop or a reading of a new show, and haven't had that experience because of the pandemic. So I don't know what's going to be next. I'm hoping that I have one because it's just really what I love to do, and I hope I get the chance to be creative on another new score and help put it together. And we'll see when that happens.
I guarantee you that you're going to be working like
Uh,
September 15th. As soon as Broadway orders on the 14th, you're like, Sean, I need you here. Trust me, you too good
thanks.
to
We'll
be
see.
like unemployed like me.
Oh, you're very sweet.
Uh, where can people find you on social media, internet?
Yeah, my website is smdrums.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. If you want to reach out, I'm happy to hear from everybody.
You give lessons?
Yeah, I was doing Zoom lessons during the pandemic. It was the first time, I had nights free, and I was like, people that had asked me to do lessons, I was able to do it. So I did some over Zoom, and now I've even started doing some in person again at my studio, which has been really fun you know, to get to help people with their sound and their feel and see some progress. It's really rewarding.
Sean McDaniel, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. You have so much
Thanks for
wisdom to
having me.
share. And as one last thing, I was talking to Matt Vanderand, and he was telling me that a lot of opportunities opened up for him once you got your own show because you were subbing everywhere and all the people needed to replace you.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
So I think, like I said before, you're going to be working in no time, and you have so much wisdom to share. And I thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Clayton, for having me.
And we will definitely talk soon. I'm sure I'll see you on the Broadway campus sooner than later.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks again. All right, bye.